What if I told you that the key to an unbreakable life, to a state of inner peace so profound that the chaos of the world can't touch it, isn't found by adding something new? It's not about acquiring more money, more status, or more followers. The most profound secret, the one the ancients understood and our modern world has forgotten, is about changing a single faculty that you already possess and use every second of every day: your perception. We live our lives convinced that our happiness and our misery are caused by external events. A deal falls through, and we are devastated. We receive praise, and we are elated. A market downturn erases our profits, and we sink into anxiety. We are, in effect, puppets, and the strings are being pulled by forces entirely outside of our control. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and rose to become one of the most respected thinkers of his time, laid this illusion bare nearly 2,000 years ago. He stated, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." Read that again. It's not the event itself, but your judgment about the event. That is the source of your suffering. This is the master key that unlocks every other door to mental fortitude. I learned this lesson not in a library, but in the crucible of the tech industry. I was a young CEO, full of ambition and ego. A much larger, better-funded competitor announced a product that was a direct threat to our core business. The news hit our office like a shockwave. My leadership team was in a state of panic. The narrative we immediately constructed was one of defeat. They will crush us. We're finished. All our work has been for nothing. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I was fueled by coffee and cortisol, reacting to every piece of news with raw, unfocused anger and fear. My judgment was that this event was catastrophic, and so, for me, it was. It was during a sleepless 3 a.m. walk that Epictetus's wisdom, which I had only read academically, finally struck me as a practical tool. The event was just data. A competitor launched a product. That was the fact. My suffering, my anxiety, was coming from the story I was layering on top of that fact. The story was optional. I had the power to change it. I walked back into the office the next morning and gathered my team. We threw out the old story of defeat and wrote a new one. This wasn't a catastrophe, it was an opportunity. Our competitor had shown their hand, revealing the market they were after. Their size made them slow, arrogant. This wasn't a death sentence, it was a gift. It was the catalyst that forced us to become faster, more innovative, and more connected to our customers than ever before. We didn't change the event, but by changing our perception of it, we transformed our entire reality. This isn't just about business. Think about a simple, everyday example. You're giving a presentation and a senior executive in the room is frowning, arms crossed. Your initial perception, your story, might be, "He hates my ideas. I'm bombing this. My career is over." This judgment creates anxiety and causes your performance to falter. But what if you chose a different perception? "He's a deep thinker. He's intensely focused on my words, processing the data." Or even, maybe he just had a bad morning, or is thinking about an unrelated problem. The external event, a man's facial expression, hasn't changed. But by refusing to accept the first self-defeating story, you retain command of your inner state. You stay calm, focused, and perform at your best. So I ask you, what is the primary story you are telling yourself about your current struggle? The one about your career, your finances, your relationships. Is that story an objective fact, or is it a judgment, a narrative you have chosen to believe? And the most important question, is that story serving you, or is it imprisoning you? Once we accept that our perception is the lens through which we interpret reality, the next logical step is to build the machine that operates that lens. The foundational mechanism for this is another Stoic principle, perhaps the most practical of them all, the dichotomy of control. It is a simple, yet life-altering mental model. Epictetus framed it with piercing clarity. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are body, property, reputation, office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This isn't just philosophy, it is a diagnostic tool for the soul. The vast majority of human anxiety, frustration, and despair comes from a fundamental confusion between these two categories. It comes from investing our precious and finite energy into things we cannot, under any circumstances, control. The weather, the economy, the stock market, what other people think of you, whether someone replies to your email, these are all external. They are not of your own doing. To stake your inner peace on them is to build your house on shifting sand. I experienced this with brutal force during the dot-com crash of the early 2000s. Overnight, the market turned. Valuations that had been astronomical were suddenly worthless. I watched my personal net worth and my company's valuation get eviscerated. The initial reaction, from myself and everyone around me, was a feeling of profound helplessness and rage. We were furious at the market, at the analysts, at the entire system. We were trying to push back against a hurricane. For weeks, we wasted energy on the uncontrollable. The turning point came in a tense board meeting where the prevailing mood was one of blame and despair. I took a whiteboard and drew a simple line down the middle. On one side, I wrote, "Out of our control." On the other, "Within our control." Under the first column, we listed everything: the NASDAQ, investor sentiment, media narratives, the actions of our competitors. The list was long and intimidating. Then I turned to the second column. What could we control? The quality of our product, how we treated our remaining employees, our honesty in communicating with our shareholders, our work ethic, the discipline of our spending, our creativity in finding new revenue streams. Looking at the two lists was like turning a light on in a dark room. All our energy, all our emotional turmoil was focused on the first column, the one we couldn't change. From that moment on, we made a pact to ignore the first column and dedicate 100% of our focus to the second. It didn't save our valuation overnight, but it saved us. It replaced panic with purpose. It transformed us from victims of circumstance into architects of our response. We survived and eventually thrived because we learned to distinguish between the business of the universe and our own business. Apply this to your own life. You are stuck in a massive traffic jam and are going to be late for a crucial meeting. You cannot control the accident up ahead. You cannot control the cars around you. You cannot control the flow of time. Screaming, honking your horn, or letting your blood pressure skyrocket is a complete waste of your life force. It is insanity. What can you control? Your breathing, the choice to find a calming podcast or piece of music, the decision to make a calm, polite phone call to inform the other party of your delay, your choice on how you will use that unexpected found time. You can focus on the uncontrollable and arrive at your destination angry, flustered, and less effective. Or you can focus on what you can control and arrive calm, composed, and ready. Take a moment right now and identify the single greatest source of stress in your life. Now, take out a piece of paper and draw that same line down the middle. On one side, list every element of that situation you have absolutely no control over. On the other, list every single thing, no matter how small, that is within your power, your actions, your attitude, your choices. Which list are you giving your energy to? Where could you shift your focus, right now, to move from a state of passive anxiety to one of active purpose? We've established that we don't control events, only our perception of them. We've learned to separate what we can control from what we can't. Now we arrive at the engine of the entire system, the truly transformative secret. This is where we move from defense to offense. It's the principle that turns poison into medicine, and stumbling blocks into stepping stones. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most powerful man on earth in his time, articulated it best in his private journals. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is the alchemy of the iron mind. It is the ability to not just endure a negative event, but to reframe it as a necessary and beneficial part of your path. It is the active practice of finding the opportunity, the lesson, or the strength hidden within every misfortune. The obstacle is not something to be avoided or merely tolerated. It is the raw material from which you will forge your success and your character. This principle saved my career and perhaps my sanity. Years ago, I had a co-founder and a man I considered a close friend. We built a company from nothing. I trusted him implicitly. Then, in a move of stunning betrayal, he conspired behind my back, poached several of our key employees and top clients, and left to start a direct competitor. The initial feeling was not philosophical calm, I can assure you. It was a white-hot mixture of rage, personal hurt, and a deep sense of victimhood. My first narrative was, "He has ruined me. He has destroyed what we built." For a time, I was paralyzed by this story, but the Stoic training I had been practicing forced me to ask a different question. How can this be the way? If the impediment advances action, what action is this betrayal demanding of me? The painful process of self-reflection began. The betrayal revealed a fundamental weakness in our company's structure. We were too reliant on a few key clients. Thank you for that lesson. It revealed a naivete in my own judgment of character, forcing me to become a more astute leader. Thank you for that lesson. It forced our remaining team to become more resilient, more unified, and more innovative than ever before to survive. Thank you for that lesson. The act that was intended to destroy my business became the very fire that tempered it into something far stronger and more durable than it had been before. My greatest professional obstacle literally became the way to my greatest success. This isn't just for company-altering betrayals. It works on every scale. A project you are leading at work suddenly has its budget cut in half. That is the obstacle. The conventional mind sees only limitation and failure. The trained mind asks, how does this advance action? The budget cut forces you to abandon expensive, inefficient methods. It demands a level of creativity and resourcefulness you wouldn't have otherwise accessed. The constraint becomes the catalyst for a brilliant, lean solution that you never would have discovered with a blank check. The obstacle becomes the way. You suffer a physical injury that prevents you from training in your favorite sport. The obstacle. The way. This forces you to explore other areas of fitness, perhaps improving your flexibility or stability, which ultimately makes you a better athlete when you return. It may also teach you a valuable lesson in patience and humility. The obstacle becomes the way. Consider the most significant obstacle in your life right now. Not a minor annoyance, but the great wall that seems to be blocking your progress. I want you to stop seeing it as a barrier. Instead, I want you to look at it as a question. The obstacle is asking you something. What strength is this challenge demanding that you build? What weakness is it exposing that you need to fortify? If you were to believe, with absolute conviction, that this exact event was placed on your path for your own benefit, how would your approach to it change? We have journeyed from managing perception to focusing our control and reframing obstacles as opportunities. Now, we must take the final, most profound step. It is a step beyond mere acceptance or strategic reframing. It is the practice of amor fati, a Latin phrase championed by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, which translates to a love of one's fate. This is the pinnacle of the iron mind. It is not just to bear what is necessary, but to love it. It is to see every single moment of your life, the triumphs, the failures, the joys, the betrayals, the brutal hardships, not just as acceptable, but as essential. It is to understand that to remove even one of these negative events would be to unravel the entire tapestry of who you are. This isn't passive resignation. It is an enthusiastic, affirmative, and joyful embrace of reality, exactly as it is. For years, I saw this as a beautiful but unattainable poetic concept. It took a genuine crisis to make it real for me. About a decade ago, I went through a health scare. A routine checkup revealed an anomaly that required a series of urgent, invasive tests. For several weeks, I lived in the terrifying limbo of not knowing whether I was facing a manageable condition or a terminal illness. My old programming kicked in: fear, anger, and the question, why me? I saw this potential illness as a monstrous injustice, a cosmic error that needed to be resisted and resented. My Stoic practice provided the tools to manage the fear, but it was the idea of amor fati that allowed me to transcend it. Lying in a sterile hospital room, awaiting another scan, I decided to conduct an experiment. What if this wasn't an injustice? What if this was my fate, and my task was not just to accept it, but to love it? What if this health scare was the exact thing I needed? The shift in perspective was seismic. If I loved this fate, then this fear was a teacher, reminding me not to take my health for granted ever again. The sterile smell of the hospital was a reminder of the vibrant, beautiful world outside. The potential for a shortened life was a powerful command to live more fully, more urgently, and with more meaning right now. The scare wasn't a curse, it was a clarifying fire, burning away all the trivial anxieties and distractions I had accumulated. It forced me to have conversations with my loved ones that I had put off for years. It reordered my priorities away from insignificant business squabbles and towards legacy, love, and contribution. I came to see that whether I lived another 30 years or 30 days, this experience was making my remaining time infinitely richer. I began to feel a strange and powerful sense of gratitude for the very thing I had initially cursed. That is amor fati. Think of a past hardship that, in hindsight, you now recognize as a critical turning point for the better. A painful breakup that led you to find a more suitable partner. A job loss that pushed you to discover your true calling. At the time, it felt like a tragedy. Now, you see it as a blessing in disguise. Amor fati is the practice of cultivating that hindsight in the present moment. It's the ability to trust that the universe or reality is not working against you, even when it feels that way. It is the deep-seated faith that this too, this very challenge, is a necessary part of your path. Look at your life as a whole, as a complete story. Is there a past failure or a painful memory that you still resent? A moment you wish had never happened? Now, ask yourself, what positive changes, what strengths, what new paths did that event, however painful, make possible? Can you begin to see it not as a scar on your story, but as a crucial plot point that made the rest of the narrative possible? Can you learn not just to live with it, but to be grateful for it? Understanding these principles intellectually is one thing. Embodying them when the storms of life hit is another entirely. A philosophy is useless if it exists only in your head. It must be woven into the fabric of your daily actions. This is why the Stoics spoke of building an inner citadel, a mental fortress that you construct brick by brick, day by day, during times of peace, so that it stands unbreached when war is declared upon you by fate. You do not start building a fortress in the middle of a siege. You build it when the sun is shining. The practice of building your inner citadel is about creating a set of non-negotiable routines and mental habits that forge resilience as a default state, not as an emergency measure. It is the proactive cultivation of a mind that is too strong to be disturbed. When I was finally rebuilding my life after my burnout, I realized that my previous success had been built on an unsustainable foundation of caffeine, adrenaline, and willpower. It was a recipe for collapse. My new foundation had to be one of deliberate practice. I instituted 3 core habits that I maintain to this day. They are the bedrock of my citadel. First, the morning review. Every morning, before I check a single email or read a single headline, I spend 15 minutes with a journal. I follow the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This sounds morbid, but it is profoundly empowering. I calmly visualize the things that could go wrong during the day. A difficult client could call. A key employee could resign. A project could fail. I imagine these events not to create anxiety, but to rehearse my response. I remind myself that these external events do not control my inner state. I affirm which virtues, patience, courage, wisdom, justice, I will need to call upon if they occur. By rehearsing adversity in my mind, I strip it of its power to shock and overwhelm me when it arrives in reality. I have already met it on my own terms. Second, the philosophical reading. Every day I spend at least 20 minutes reading from the original Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. Not for academic study, but for practical counsel. These are not just books, they are training manuals for the mind. They have faced every problem I will ever face, from dealing with difficult people to confronting mortality. Immersing myself in their wisdom is like having the greatest mentors in history on call, reminding me of the principles I need to live by. It calibrates my mind for the day ahead, tuning it to the frequency of reason and virtue, not reactivity and emotion. Third, the evening review. Before sleep, I spend another 10 minutes with my journal, reflecting on the day. This is a practice Seneca detailed in his letters. I ask myself 3 questions. What did I do wrong? What did I do right? What could I do differently tomorrow? This is not an exercise in self-flagellation. It is an honest, objective audit of my actions and judgments. It allows me to learn from my mistakes, to reinforce my successes, and to ensure that I am a slightly better, slightly wiser human being tomorrow than I was today. It ensures that the bricks of the citadel are laid correctly and the foundation is secure. These practices are not glamorous. They are not life hacks. They are disciplines. They are the equivalent of a warrior maintaining his weapons and armor every single day. You may not need them today. You may not need them tomorrow. But when the siege comes, and it will, you will be profoundly grateful that you did the work. Your peace of mind will not be a matter of luck, but a matter of construction. What is your current daily routine for mental and emotional training? Do you have one? If you were to design a simple 10-minute daily practice to begin building your own inner citadel, what would it consist of? What one small habit could you implement tomorrow morning to begin laying the first brick? Even with a fortified inner citadel, the pressures of daily life can feel overwhelming. We get so lost in the details of our struggles, the frustrating project, the argument with the spouse, the financial worry, that we lose all sense of scale. Our problems expand to fill our entire mental space. The antidote to this myopia is another powerful Stoic exercise, the view from above. Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, frequently practiced this. He would, in his imagination, pull his consciousness back from his immediate surroundings. He would visualize himself looking down upon his own body, then upon the city of Rome, then upon the entire European continent, then the whole earth, and finally seeing the earth as a tiny speck in the vast, silent emptiness of the cosmos. From this vantage point, this Platonic crotch, as it is sometimes called, he could see his own life and its attendant dramas in their proper context. The purpose of this exercise is not to trivialize your problems or to encourage apathy. It is to achieve perspective. From the view from above, the argument that consumed your entire day reveals itself as a momentary blip of friction between 2 tiny mortals on a spinning rock. The career setback that feels like the end of the world is seen as a minor course correction in a journey of millions of moments. The frantic urgency of our ambitions and the crushing weight of our anxieties are put into their proper proportion against the backdrop of geological time and cosmic infinity. I once lost a deal that I had worked on for over a year. It was a 7-figure contract that I was convinced would define the future of my company. When the client pulled out at the last minute, I was completely shattered. It felt personal, monumental, a defining failure. I spent a week in a fog of anger and self-pity. My world had shrunk to the size of that one lost contract. One evening, desperate for a shift, I drove out of the city, away from the light pollution, and simply looked up at the night sky. I forced myself to perform the exercise. I saw myself, a single, agitated man standing by his car. I saw the city, a small cluster of lights. I saw the continent and then the planet, hanging in space. I looked at the stars, realizing that the light from many of them had been traveling for thousands, even millions of years to reach my eyes. A journey that began long before my company, my country, or even my species existed. In that moment of profound awe, my perspective shattered and then reformed. The lost deal didn't vanish, but it shrank to its appropriate size. It was a single note in the grand symphony of existence. My life, my company, my monumental failure. It was all part of a much larger, impossibly complex and beautiful dance. I drove back to the city not with a feeling of insignificance, but with a feeling of profound liberation. I was free from the crushing weight of my own self-importance. The next day, I went back to work with a renewed sense of calm, clarity, and purpose, ready to focus on the next opportunity. This is a tool you can use anytime, anywhere. When you feel overwhelmed by stress, close your eyes. In your mind's eye, float up from your chair. See the room you're in. Float higher, see the building, the street, the city. Keep pulling back until you see the curve of the earth. See the continents, the oceans, the swirling clouds. Float further, past the moon, past the other planets in our solar system, until you are looking back at our entire world as a pale blue dot. Hold that image for a moment. Now, from that vantage point, look back at the problem that was causing you so much stress. See it for what it is. Does practicing this perspective make your problems disappear? No, but it does prevent your problems from owning you. It loosens their grip. Are you allowing the immediate pressures of the moment to distort your sense of scale? How would your decision-making change if you approached your current challenges from this view from above? There is a danger in all this talk of perception, reframing, and perspective. The danger is that philosophy becomes a purely intellectual exercise, a sophisticated form of passive contemplation. But the Stoics were not armchair philosophers. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor who led armies and managed a vast empire. Seneca was a statesman and one of the wealthiest men in Rome. Epictetus was a teacher who demanded rigorous application from his students. For them, the purpose of a clear mind was to fuel right action. Perception is the rudder, but action is the engine. Without it, you are adrift. This brings us to the crucial Stoic virtue, the discipline of action. Once you have managed your perceptions, focused on what you can control, and reframed your obstacle as the way, the final step is to act, to move, to take what the obstacle is teaching you and apply it with deliberate, focused, and persistent effort. An iron mind is useless without the will to use it to make an impact in the world. True fortitude is not just thinking correctly, it is acting correctly, especially when it is difficult. I once mentored a brilliant young woman, a programmer, who was unexpectedly laid off from a prestigious tech firm. It was a devastating blow to her confidence and her financial security. Her initial perception was one of personal failure and injustice. Her first instinct was to retreat, to spend weeks polishing her resume, consumed by anxiety and bitterness. We worked through the principles. First, we isolated her perception. The story she was telling herself was, "I am not good enough." We replaced it with the objective fact. The company had a strategic shift, and my role was eliminated. Second, we applied the dichotomy of control. She couldn't control the company's decision. She could control her response. Third, we looked for the way in the obstacle. What was this layoff making possible? It was offering her freedom. Freedom from a corporate structure she secretly disliked, and the time to work on a personal project she had been passionate about for years, but never had the energy to pursue. This is where many people stop. They feel better, they have a new perspective, but they don't take the crucial next step. This is where the discipline of action comes in. I gave her a simple, demanding instruction. You are allowed to grieve this for 48 hours. Then you will spend the next 30 days, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., not looking for a job, but building the prototype for your project. Treat it as your new job. It was a struggle. Her anxieties didn't just vanish, but every time fear or doubt crept in, she returned to her training. She focused not on the overwhelming goal of launching a company, but on the immediate, controllable action in front of her, writing the next line of code. She broke the problem down into the smallest possible components and attacked them one by one. Her action was not born from a fleeting moment of inspiration, but from a disciplined commitment. A year later, she launched her app. 2 years after that, it was acquired for a sum that made her former salary look like a rounding error. Her layoff, the obstacle, did not just become the way it became the foundation of her fortune, because she met a change in perception with a disciplined commitment to action. Your obstacles are not just there to be thought about. They are there to be acted upon. When you face a challenge, the trained response is not simply, "How should I think about this?" but, "What does this now make possible for me to do?" Action is the great clarifier. You can spend months strategizing and worrying, but 10 minutes of focused action will teach you more than a lifetime of passive rumination. Think about the obstacle you identified earlier. You have reframed it. You have considered it from a higher perspective. Now, what is the smallest, most immediate physical action you can take right now to engage with it? Not a plan to make a plan. Not a wish, a concrete step. Is it sending one email? Making one phone call? Writing the first paragraph? The path forward is not revealed by thinking, but by doing. What is your first step? We have traveled the landscape of the mind. We've learned to command our perception, to distinguish what we can and cannot control, to find the way in the obstacle, to love our fate, to build our inner fortress, to see from above, and to translate thought into disciplined action. There is one final perspective, one ultimate reframe that underpins all the others. It is the concept the Stoics called memento mori. Remember, you must die. This sounds like the most morbid philosophy imaginable, but it is, in fact, the most life-affirming. It is the one tool that, when used correctly, strips away everything that is not essential. The constant, quiet awareness of our own mortality is not meant to be a source of fear, but a source of profound clarity and urgency. Early in my career, I was obsessed with trivialities. I would waste days fuming over a minor slight from a competitor. I would lose sleep over a dip in quarterly earnings. I agonized over public perception and the opinions of people I didn't even respect. My ego was a fragile, tyrannical thing, and it demanded constant feeding and defending. My life was a series of small, exhausting battles over things that, in the grand scheme, meant absolutely nothing. The practice of memento mori is what began to dissolve this prison of ego. I started a simple practice. Every morning, I would look in the mirror and say to myself, "You could leave this life right now." I would contemplate the fact that this day might be my last. The effect was not despair, it was liberation. When you truly internalize that your time is finite and uncertain, the priorities of your life snap into sharp focus. The fear of asking for that promotion or starting that new venture pales in comparison to the regret of never having tried at all. The anger you hold towards someone who wronged you is revealed as a pointless waste of your limited emotional energy. The desire to accumulate more and more material possessions is exposed as an absurd quest, for you will leave it all behind. Memento mori is the ultimate reframing tool. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding? You will have it, because you may not have it tomorrow. That creative project you've been dreaming of? You will start it today, because later is not guaranteed. That I love you you've left unsaid? You will say it, because it is the only thing that truly matters. This final secret is what binds all the others together. It is what fuels the entire operating system for an iron mind. Why manage your perceptions? Because your time is too short to be wasted in self-inflicted misery. Why focus on what you can control? Because your energy is too precious to be squandered on the impossible. Why turn the obstacle into the way? Because every moment is a gift, and every challenge is an opportunity to live more fully before your time is up. Building an iron mind is not about becoming unfeeling or detached. It is about becoming so profoundly connected to the reality of life and death that you are able to live more bravely, more purposefully, and more peacefully than you ever thought possible. It is the journey from being a reactive leaf blown about by the winds of circumstance to becoming the rooted, unshakable oak that stands firm in the storm. The secret was never out there. It was never in a bank account or a title. It has been inside you all along, waiting to be forged. The question is, will you begin the work today?